We need one more. We need to get Luis a microphone next time.
Do we? I got one.
We should no, it's okay.
But next time?
Yeah. If we do like a full on, like if there's a whole crew like this.
If you're down to do it, like, you know what I mean?
Go slow. We just met.
You know what I mean? Seriously though. Like if you're down to do it, it'll be cool.
Well, I mean, we're doing it right now.
But there's other days, you know what I mean?
Dang, man.
Yeah.
I'm in too deep.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Are We Where You At podcast. I'm your host, Johnny. We got Justin here. No?
Yeah, I'm here.
Well, you're here.
I didn't know I was going to get announced.
That quick, huh?
Sorry.
Just drug you right in. He's working. Rigo had some stuff come up, so he wasn't able to make it. So I got second best. No, you're good.
No,
you're not
bro.
Second best.
It's a privilege to be your runner-up.
Thank you, man.
First runner-up.
Yeah, first runner-up.
It's who you count on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is a second episode back, and I got to look at the camera, and we got Luis over here. He's off camera, but he's going to remind me we got a camera right here on us, and we got a guest that drove all the way from San Diego.
It was such a long drive.
Was it?
No, it wasn't at all.
Oh,
it was pretty
okay.
nice.
But traffic was okay?
Yeah, it was fine.
Cool. And you might recognize her voice from the bonus episode from last season, but it wasn't a proper episode. We did it at a hotel room, kind of makeshift, but it was still a great episode.
Yeah.
One of the most popular ones on our podcast.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. So that was, it was a great opportunity, and we had to take it. We met just like I was doing a delivery at a hotel.
Yep.
And fortune cookies and things, and magic happened. And sure enough, you are a hypnotherapist.
Yes, a clinical hypnotherapist.
Clinical.
So I use it for therapeutic purposes.
So the clinical, that means it's like you're safe?
I don't know if that's what it means.
Well, you said clinical. I said hypnotherapist. You're like clinical. Like.
So it's not a stage hypnotist, which is what most people think when they think hypnotize or hypnotherapy. They think that you're a performer, that you get people to cluck like chickens.
That's what I was going to say.
Immediately fall asleep at the snap. And that's not exactly what I do.
I would love it if somebody could snap and I'd wake up.
Oh, really?
Right? That'd be cool. Instead of having to do an energy drink, just like a snap and like,
oh, you mean like if you had a cup of coffee?
Yeah.
Oh, that would be cool.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
You would be like Starbucks, but like just
but you're not that?
No, I'm not that. So I use hypnosis to deal with the subconscious mind and how it influences behavior, and I use that for therapeutic purposes. So to help people really uncover the roots of trauma primarily, or anything that might be getting in the way. Basically, it's your old programming, your subconscious script that's constantly running and drives 90 to 95% of all your behavior.
And people don't even know it's there, right?
It's in the background. Yeah.
So explain that a little bit before we get too far into the episode. What do you mean it's in the background?
So if you think about a computer that's running and you're running an active program, that's conscious mind behavior. So you're intentionally trying to do it. It's something that you're very aware that's happening. The subconscious mind is like the programming behind the software that's running in the background at all times. And it's how everything shows up. So how it's written, how the code is written is how a thing behaves. So as you apply that to human behavior, the codes that are written so early on in our development, they're what dictate and determine how we run our program. And so those things happen when we're mostly unaware, when we're like 7 years of age or younger, and they're what drive our beliefs throughout our lifetime until or unless we look at those and we decide if we want to keep them, if they're healthy or not. And then we have the opportunity to either maintain that programming or to rewrite it. And that's what hypnosis helps do. So
the thing that comes up in my mind, I just got to say, it seems unfair.
It is unfair.
It's like,
but
it happens when you're a kid, the programming happens. So whether, if your dad's a jerk or something, and then now you hate men because the way your dad treated you. And it's like, you have to face that later on in life. You help people. Oh, maybe that's why you're having a hard time with men. Mm. That's what you do. You kind of bring that out.
Right. We uncover the root belief that is at the core of all of that behavior. So you may not be aware of it because, like I said, it's running in the background. It's the script that's playing behind the scenes and under the radar. And so through hypnosis, you're put in a state where those subconscious beliefs come to the surface, and then we can identify them, trace them back to the root, and give you the opportunity to make a different belief and a different conclusion about what that new belief means on how you live your life.
And you get the choice. You give the power back to the person, basically.
Right, as an adult. So like you said, it being unfair, this happening as a child, well, how we kind of equal the score is now as an adult, you get to make a new decision. You get to rewrite the old childhood script that you've been carrying with you your whole life.
Yeah. What do you say to people that kind of don't believe it, that that's possible?
I say try it.
Give it a shot.
Yeah, give it a shot. A lot of people think that hypnosis is just you completely surrender your willpower to the therapist, and that's not accurate. All hypnosis is self-hypnosis. So if you are not open to this experience, if you're not willing to go through the process, then the mind actually won't allow you to go there.
There's like some safety
It's survival.
measures inside of your mind
Yes.
that won't make you cluck like a chicken if you don't want to.
Right.
Or go down this deep, dark corridor called abuse, maybe.
Yeah.
You know, you have to kind of ease your way into that, or not. Your mind will say, no, we're not going there.
Yeah, you have to have a certain level of comfort and willingness in order to go down that path. And I want to say that the people that do it are automatically to be applauded, because it does take intense courage to really just be willing to open the door on darkness that you don't know what might be lying there, and being able to walk in bravely and say, I'm going to address whatever comes up. I think that's really courageous.
You know what? I just remembered. I don't think I said your name.
Oh, that's okay.
Leah. Because when you're saying the cord, you know, go inside this, it reminded me of Luke going into the cave on Dagobah.
Yeah.
And, you know, he cuts off Vader's head, but he goes and he unmasks it, and it was his own. He had to face himself.
Because that was the symbolism, right? Like facing the dark side, facing our shadow self, which we talk about in this line of therapy, that until you face your shadow, the darkness that's within all of us, then you can't really accept the light either. That you have to be able to fully embrace the darkness and the light that's within you to have that love and that acceptance of the whole person that you are.
That balance.
The balance of the force.
You know, it's interesting because you said you can't fully embrace the light unless you embrace the dark. We're taught you got to get rid of the dark. The dark is bad. The dark is dark for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
So that's some of our early programming. But you're saying, no, the dark is there and we need to face it and figure out why it's there.
Like you said, it brings balance. The darkness has power. So does the light. And what we say is that you can't heal what you can't see or what you're unwilling to look at. And I think that goes along with traditional therapy when you think about addictions, right? Until you're willing to admit that there's an issue, there's a problem, there's a demon there, there's a darkness that I need to face, you cannot heal it until you look at it. And typically you have to look at it straight in the eyes, and you have to acknowledge it, be honest about it, and then be willing to do the dance.
Because it's your darkness, right? So that's scary.
But the darkness also points out some of your greatest repressed strengths.
Explain that a little bit. What do you mean by that?
Our darkness typically are the parts of ourselves that we have yet to accept, that we judge, that we label as negative, as bad, as evil. But yet, if you have a belief system in light that is all loving, then everything can be brought into the light and can have a divine purpose. But if you keep it hidden in the dark, then it can never rise to its true value. It can never be self-realized, like Maslow says, or that self-realization coming up the hierarchy of needs. You have to bring it up. You have to let it be exposed to the light. And the only way you can do that is to go into the darkness, right?
Yeah. So you go into the darkness and you find maybe a tool that you could use, something that could serve you later on in life that, well, this was there the whole time, but I wasn't willing to face it.
And things look very different in the dark than they do when you bring them into the light.
Okay, so you're saying you go down this corridor and then you find something like, wait a minute, this wasn't as bad as I thought?
How would you know if it's been in the dark the whole time? Darkness distorts things, it hides things. And so when you allow the light to reveal it, then maybe there's a revelation of beauty there that you weren't able to see when you had suppressed it and covered it up and hidden it and denied it. And then once you bring it into the light, you're like, oh, this is a beautiful gift.
So I would want to ask, is this something that you've experienced in your own life?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
is that what got you into being a hypnotherapist?
What got me into being a hypnotherapist was having a personal experience of knowing that there was darkness or things maybe that I was afraid of more so than I thought was evil, that I needed help getting the light shed upon. And so the hypnotherapy that I went into being a patient helped me do that. And in doing that, it took away the fear because it disarmed it, and it helped me to realize that the belief in my mind about how bad it was or how terrible it was, once I actually dealt with it, it lost that power.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't as bad as I had built it up in my mind.
Because things could be scarier in your mind than in reality.
Sure. I mean, it's like the monster in the closet or under the bed. And then you look and it's like, oh, it was a shoe.
Yeah, exactly. My mentor would always tell me, it's like, okay, where do I start? He said, start where you're afraid.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't want to start there. It's like, well, that's where you got to start. Start wherever you're afraid. Even when it comes to the Bible, start with what you don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
Start there. And that seems intimidating.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you're giving me bad advice now. It's like, well, no. And then once I dive into it, it's like a thread that I follow. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, this isn't so bad. And then I've noticed as putting that into practice,
Mm-hmm.
following that thread, things aren't as bad. And so it's like, I continue to climb this mountain as it gets taller and taller with more and more confidence that it's like, well, it wasn't that bad last time. So it's probably not going to be bad again. There's the initial shock of like, oh no, but it's like, okay, I've been here before. If I can get my frame of mind right,
Mm-hmm.
thinking like, okay, we've been here. What did we do last time? What did he say? Face it.
Yes. And as you start to do that more and more frequently, uncovering these layers that we've built up of these judgments and beliefs, then it becomes easier every time that you do it because you're creating new habits and you're realizing that these fears that we create are mostly in our minds. They're mostly the judgments that we've imposed upon things. And so we're able to remove them. And as you do that more often, you become better at it and you start to see fear as an opportunity for growth. And
fear is an opportunity for growth.
Yes.
I like that.
Because it makes me think of I believe it's in Hinduism and a little bit in Buddhism about the concept of Maya, about illusion. And really that's what fear is. Fear is illusion. And so as you begin to unmask this illusion, then you start to realize that there's really nothing that is bad per se. Everything is an opportunity for growth if you approach it that way.
So that's kind of in the Bible where all things work together for the good.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of a way to put that because it's like, well, this doesn't feel good. This doesn't sound good. This doesn't look good. But that could all be an illusion.
Well, I think growth in the moment is almost always uncomfortable, if not painful. You think about going to the gym and working out. In order for you to improve and become stronger, you have to go through a process of discomfort, of pain, because you can only break beyond your current state by stretching, by lengthening, by doing things that can be painful, that grow you. And then it's in the recovery process, when you talk about a muscle rebuilding itself, it's actually the tearing of the muscle fibers and then your body repairing back over it that's making it stronger. We have to be torn sometimes to get stronger.
But the thing, it's like, okay, if I go to the gym, I could see the improvement. It's tough when it comes to the mind because it's not as tangible, I guess. It's not as, it doesn't self-evident, because I could see oh, okay, my biceps are growing or, but it's like, okay, the mind, well, maybe I wasn't as far along as I thought, and then you go into a panic. And
I think the growth that you can see when you work on these deeper issues is in the relationships and the dynamics and the interactions that you have with other people. And you start to see those outcomes that maybe seem to have a pattern before. It always goes this way. People always reject me. I never get the job. You start to see those patterns shift as you begin to heal, as you begin to go into the darkness, as you begin to uncover the illusions. then you're able to show up differently in the world, and people will start to respond differently to you. And then the outcome's different.
Yeah, so that's almost like the law of attraction too, right? Because you attract different people to you, and then the people you might have like vibed with earlier in life, it's like, well, that connection's just not there. And then you could get afraid to let that connection go. Like, well, I'm losing a friend. You know, it's like, but we don't have that same in common anymore. We don't have that, you know, and it gets scary because it's like, well, they're not coming around anymore. And I'm used to having them around, and I'm used to doing this.
And so for that, I would say that one of my teachers talks about how the primary thing that we're meant to do in this process of healing and growth is learn to attune to our true and highest self. And as we get better at attuning to ourself, anything else that doesn't resonate with that vibration of our true essence will either get better or it will leave. So when you start to see those things from your life exit as you're just allowing those things to be let go of that are no longer in attunement to your true essence, then you start to see them as blessings. It's like a bullet that you dodged. You know, it's like, oh, thank God I didn't date that person. And you see those things exiting your life more effortlessly. You don't even have to engage in that struggle because your vibration starts to resonate at a higher vibration to where if it doesn't fit you, it either improves to rise to your vibration or it cannot stand to be in your presence.
So you could actually make your group, your clique, your friends rise with you.
As long as you stay attuned, as long as you are doing the work.
If you're doing the work, but then there's some that might like, whatever, he thinks he's full of himself or she's full of it, you know, and then you see those go by the wayside or like they're not calling anymore.
And it comes back to the whole light dark, that when something gets exposed to the light, it can't stay in the darkness, right? So the things that want to remain in the dark, like it talks about in the Bible, it says that the light came into the world and the darkness hated the light, right?
Yeah.
It couldn't tolerate it. So when you bring your light into a room and there's darkness that intends to remain dark, it can't stand in your presence.
Yeah, and that could be another place of being uncomfortable, right? Because you're like, well, I'm used to these people kind of agreeing with me and being on the same level, and it's not anymore. But you have to own, like, no, I'm growing. That's something you got to know inside, right?
Yes, and something that I'm learning pretty recently along this journey is that in order to really grow, you have to come to a place of getting good at letting go. You have to.
You have to, huh?
Yes. I mean, so there's a really good analogy about pruning and about how when you're trying to grow a plant even, that there's different things that you prune. A lot of people think you prune away the dead stuff. Right, you do, but that's not the first thing that a professional agricultural person will do. They'll prune away the things that are good but not great.
But not great.
Because that steals the life from where you're trying to go. So you have to know where you're trying to go. You have to have the vision for your life. You have to know the flower that you want to be in this world, and you have to be willing to trim away the good but not great. And that's hard.
Who wants to do that?
The people who want the great.
So to get the great, it's like you got to take account of your life and where you're at and say, you know what, this has to go too.
Yeah.
And good but not great. Those you could shed tears over that.
It does. It really brings in the whole grieving process, and that's why you have to come to a point where you're able to honestly look at your willingness and your ability to let things go. And I know for me, it's revealed I was not as good at it as I had hoped that I was or wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
But in the process, and it comes back to also allowing room for abundance, because you can't have more added to your life as long as you're maintaining what you currently have. So if you want more, if you want better, you have to let go of something. There's the whole balance.
So that's like the principle of sacrifice. Something has to be sacrificed. Something has to be created a vacuum.
Right. I think it's the natural cycles of the ebb and flow of life, you know, and space. And if you want to have more abundance, you have to create room for it in your life. You can't maintain having areas of your life that are filled with the good but not great and then think that somehow great is going to be able to flow into your life. You have to make room for it. And you have to do that sometimes through a very difficult and painful process of letting go of those things that are comfortable, are familiar, are routine, are maybe dependable, and they might be good. but are they the great that you
Are
want?
they great? They're good, but not great. So that's a little bit of the intro, some background, but something we wanted to talk about that we discussed was female and male energy.
Yeah, so I really want to get clear, and I was thinking about this, to not mix up or interchange the masculine and feminine energies with gender.
Okay.
So just have a really clear distinction. Just because it's a masculine energy doesn't mean it's coming from a male.
Okay.
Just because it's a feminine energy doesn't mean it's coming from a female. Males and females, gender can have and do typically have both energies. So this is more of a talk about the energies underneath and not the genders that we associate with those primary energies.
Gotcha. Okay. So then you unpack that a little bit. Explain then what would a male or masculine energy be? Because a lot of times now you hear toxic masculine. Yes. I can't even say the word, but it's toxic.
Toxic masculinity.
There we go. That's what you hear. That's like the buzzword.
Yes, and I think that
is it? Am I toxic?
So, and that's, I think, there's a overgeneralization, and I feel like the very phraseology of that, the toxic masculinity, the toxic before the masculinity seems to label all masculinity as toxic, and I disagree very strongly, because masculinity is beautiful and it's necessary. And when you come back to the whole dualistic balance of life, of the energies of light and dark, of masculine and feminine energies, you cannot have life on this planet without a masculine energy form. It's necessary and it's beautiful.
You have to have both.
You have to have both. So masculinity in and of itself is not toxic. It's absolutely very necessary, just as equally necessary as the feminine energy. And I think that it's a really huge detriment to our society that masculinity is now being perceived just in a negative light and as damaging. And we're not able to see the beauty and the good. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. Masculine energies and that very dominant, aggressive types of behaviors that are associated with masculine energy have done a lot of damage.
Yeah. So the other buzzword is the patriarchy. You know, you hear about these societies that run off of the patriarchy, and it's like, well, yeah, they did do a lot of damage, right? There is evidence of that throughout history.
Sure.
But to label everybody that happens to be of this type, you can't just throw a blanket over that. You can't just make a blanket statement.
I think to do that is a disservice to humanity.
Yeah, because like you said, you need both. And what I'm fascinated with is the balance, right? And you mentioned the dualistic look out of it. So the dualistic is, to me, another illusion.
How so?
Well, because it's like you need the in and the out. You need both. The both are one.
The both are one.
The both are one. So it's just the way it manifests today here on this thing we call Earth, this rock that we're spinning on. And it's like, well, so in one sense, gender doesn't exist because it's like, it's only a manifestation of here. It's like, okay, because God is both.
Yes.
And we just happen to be in different bodies at different times that have certain hormones and certain chemicals and that course through your veins at certain times. So what would you say would define a feminine energy?
So, and when I give a definition, I'm thinking from the perspective of spiritual traditions throughout the ages that have created these archetypal figures of masculine or feminine forms. So a feminine energy would be one that would carry the characteristics of life-bringing, nurturing. You think of the mother archetype, you think of Mother Nature, you might think of the Mother Mary, or also sensuality is a feminine form of sensuality that's very fluid and flowy. So like more of a water, air type aspect,
more like water,
as opposed to like a solid, that would be more of a masculine energy. So feminine energy tends to have a receptive quality to it, of being open to receive, whereas the masculine energy is going to be more of the piercing. It's going to be more active and movement driven. Not to say that femininity is not, but it's a different form, a different version. And so they do create a balance. And And the nurturing component, there is a masculine nurturing component too. You think of your father, and there's a very different energy of a nurturing father than there is of a nurturing mother, but both have the capacity to be nurturing.
So it's something that you can't really, it's something you feel. In a sense, that's what I'm kind of getting, because you can't kind of put a box on it and a label. And it's like, well, this is what defines masculinity. This is what defines being feminine. It's like, okay, there is a little bit of fluid between it, because it's not like, okay, the guy that joins up for the military and likes to shoot pigs out of helicopters and like, oh, that's the man that he's there. Well, it's like, well, maybe he's not.
I mean, I feel like I'm a good example of that. I'm a woman. I feel like I'm a very feminine woman. I was a Marine. I was trained just like Marines that are males that are in combat to do the same types of things. So would that have been me acting more in a masculine energy? Probably most of the time, but it doesn't mean that everyone has to take that on 100% to flow in and out of a different energy, a masculine or a feminine energy. I was thinking about this, and I think a good way to explain it is the seasons that we have here on planet Earth. We have 4 seasons. And man really likes to create boxes to find things and put them in certain categories. Our brain is naturally equipped to categorize very quickly. It's how we survived thousands of years. And so we have set times, equinoxes, that divide the seasons. But if you're just observing nature, can you really pinpoint the moment when it shifts from summer to fall or from fall to winter?
No.
It just flows, right? It just flows from one cycle to the next. You can see small micro changes that, it's the accumulation of them. And I like to see that. I think of that as the holistic of bringing the masculine and feminine together, is when we can see that it naturally should flow into each other. It should be very cyclical. And that the mastery is not to do what I think we're really good at doing here in the West, which is binary everything, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Wrong, black, white, good, bad, pure, profane, and say that we just have males and masculine and females and feminine, and really see the beauty in that. The mastery is being able to both see and accept both in all of us, and know how to intentionally choose it and when to flow in and out of each energy. That's where mastery lies.
So then you would say there would be times for the masculine energy to be nurturing.
Yes.
So even though that's a feminine trait, more higher in the feminine trait, there's a time for the masculine guy to like, well, no, I need to be nurturing right now. My son needs me. My daughter needs me. I need to step out of this, whatever that is, to focus on, okay, well, it's going to be okay. It's going to be all right.
I think that's where the health is in any individual, whether it be with the masculine, feminine energies, or whether it be with emotions, because if you have an out of balance emotion and you respond to everything with just one emotion, that's unhealthy. If everything that I respond to is with anger, and I can't flow into sadness or joy, then I'm an unbalanced person, and I create chaos and toxicity in my life, coming back to the toxic. So it's the out of balance that creates the toxicity, not the flowing in the masculine. And I think that is what we're missing. The whole point here in our culture is that it's not the masculinity that's toxic. It's our lack of balance between the two.
Yeah, there we go. It's not bringing that balance back.
Right.
So I'll be honest, as a kid growing up with 3 sisters and a mom and a dad that wasn't really around,
Mm-hmm.
I struggled with, okay, what is masculinity? I was raised by my mom and around 3 girls, and pretty much that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember my first job first job after McDonald's was construction. And I was thrown into this almost like a pit of just this masculine energy,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm not going to put it black or white, good or bad, right or wrong, but it was just something that I was not familiar with at all. And I felt like the little chihuahua with a lot of pit bulls and I felt like lunch, right? But I knew there was something in me that I need to stay this course.
That's what I was going to ask. What was your learning experience there? What was your takeaway from that environment?
See, again, at first I hated it.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, what am I doing here? but I felt God wanted me here. That's I it's like, I kind of did some things, and I said some prayers, and it was like somebody offered me a job right after I was like, God, I need a job. And then somebody said, hey, I got this job. And I'm like, okay, well, that must be a road to go down. And it was pretty terrifying, but I did it for 10 to 15 years as an electrician down this road. And it would even go to my mentor. It's like, no, I feel I need to be here for a little while longer. And it got torturous. It got pretty bad. What
part made it torturous?
So the masculine energy that I wasn't used to, that very intense. I just went and I saw my old boss today, actually, and I said, I'm going to talk about you on the radio or on the podcast. And he's like, you better not, but it's like, no, it'll be good. So he's like a man's man. He's the one that shot pigs out of a helicopter, like every year goes hunting, a big football player. And, but he saw something in me, and he would try to get me to see it, and he did it the best way he knew how. And it was very intense, and it was like a pressure cooker, and I just saw the anger. I just saw frustration. I just saw like, oh, he's just this guy. And I painted him as bad during the time, not realizing like, oh no, later on, it's like, he was trying to teach me life lessons, because after I've been out of the job a few years, it was like, he was right about this. He was right about that. He was right about that. But the shell or the form it came in, I wasn't able to receive it at the time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure.
Yeah.
But I would say that maybe was his form of being in a masculine nurturing type of role.
No, there was no nurturing. That's the thing. There wasn't really, and not the nurturing. It was very just like bulldozer.
Okay.
Yeah.
But would you say his intention was to guide you?
But the intention was good.
Yeah.
That's what I would say. So the intention was good, but it was just like a bulldozer coming in. And so it was tough to receive. But what I would do is like, I'd get off of the work, and then I'd go see my mentor, and we'd sit down, we'd kind of dissect, well, okay, what is this? What could we learn from this? And that helped me go through that process. And one of the things I want to bring up is about the mentor is, he would actually show me these things, embody these things that a man was supposed to do. And that really helped.
The mentor, not
the mentor,
boss.
not the boss. Okay. The mentor helped show me these things and live it out. And it was almost like monkey see, monkey do. It's like, okay, if he could do it, then I could do it. And he's more nurturing. He has the balance of both. If you see the guy, he's a big guy, ex-Marine, and very intimidating looking, but he could sit down and have coffee, and he has the balance of both. And it's just like, okay, I could receive from here. I feel comfortable. I feel safe.
Yeah. That's important.
It is.
The safety. And I was thinking when you're talking about that, of where do we learn these archetypal roles, these masculine and feminine, like stereotypes of what masculine looks like and what feminine looks like. And for most of us, going back to hypnotherapy, we learned so much, we're imprinted upon so early on by our early caregivers. And you said that you didn't have really a male figure when you were growing up. So you had a lot of feminine energy, female imprinting on you. And I think a lot of young boys and males have that dynamic today. A lot of single mothers out there, a lot of lack of a male or masculine energy type of figure in their early formative years. So where do young boys and young men learn that? Where do they get it? You mentioned your mentor helping you to see and to like really observe, and he was a model. And in psychology, there's this thing known as social learning theory, that we learn through what we see. And it is very much the monkey see, monkey do, at a little bit more of an evolutionary perspective as humans, but we still do it. And we have these things called mirror neurons, where when I see you doing something, my brain lights up as if I'm doing it too. So the impact that has on our experience, on our development is huge. And when you amplify that with media and what we see in the media and the different archetypes or role models or sports players or politicians, that what they're modeling as these stereotypical masculine or feminine roles, for a lot of people, that's the only modeling that they get. And so we have, I think, started to really just identify masculine and feminine with what the media has showed us. And I think it's a disservice to both, because we were talking, you and I, about really asking the question of what's healthy masculinity look like, and who would we look to now in the media that would be able to say that's healthy masculinity. And then you said, well, what about healthy like femininity? Like, who would that be?
Please tell me.
I mean, I just like, who comes to mind for me is Oprah.
Okay.
I feel like she's a pretty great representation of healthy femininity.
Why is that?
Because she's very open. I feel like she has a warmth about her and a very nurturing and questioning, that there's a gentleness, but also there's a role of gentle correction too. You know, she's not just passive, but she does have that, I want to help people. I want to show them. I want to help people explore their own story without shame. I want to help people, and I want to understand. I want to learn from you. So I feel like that's a really good expression of her healthy femininity, and that she's done a lot to try and give back. She does a lot, especially for young girls and young women that don't have access to a lot of things that we do here in the West. So I see it as a very healthy type of energy that she's put out into the world.
So since you have somebody to point towards, to look at, then those mirror neurons will light up. If you observe her, maybe in an interview or whatever she's doing, that's like, okay, that's something I could do. And then you were able to kind of imprint that on yourself.
Yes. And I think like, even for me, my experience of growing up in grade school is we had, you know, different people that we would look to throughout history that we could point to as kind of hero figures, you know, whether they were male or female, masculine or feminine. I would think of like Amelia Earhart and her pioneering energy and exploration and what she did for women. But that was atypical of the feminine perspective in that time that she lived. And so being able to have people to look to, I think that's how we grow. And that's how we learn, what does it look like for me to wear a healthy masculine or feminine energy. But I do think that it's a bit harder to find a healthy masculine example right now in our culture and in society.
Yeah. And, you know, it was tough for me even to stick with my mentor. It's like been on and off for like 16 years, but I really had to like weather storms, and he had to weather storms with me, like in and out. Like, it's like, well, are you sure you really want to do that? Like, and he would just let me go, and I would blow up my life, and I'd show up back up his doorstep, you know, a couple of years later. And, but so the reason why I guess he was attractive as a mentor was because, so like it would take my ex-boss, like he's the man's man, but I'm never going to be that guy. I don't like guns. I don't like guns. I don't hunt. You know, I can go camping, but I would rather be in the trees, you know, and meditate somewhere. And so it's like, well, that type of masculinity will never appeal to me. You know, It's like, I do need to be, you know, tough and be a protector and do the things that I would think a man needs to do. But I just, when it would come in these other packages, I was like, well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to kill things.
Yeah, you have to be true to who you are, coming back to the attuning to our true self and our highest self. And I think that's why it's important to have a diverse pool of potential mentors to pull from, because then we can more align and associate to those that we feel more like similar to. And not everyone demonstrates their energies the same way. And that was something that I was thinking when you were talking, was that I think one of the values of having a mentor is that you get to see them behave in all different manners of circumstances of life, because life is not stagnant. It's very fluid. It's ups, it's downs. So to just see like one example in a textbook of what masculine energy looks like, that's unrealistic.
Yeah, it can't do it. It doesn't solve the need that's there. You
can't always be a hunter or a warrior or, you know, these other types of things that we've identified with masculinity. You have to see someone go through sadness, grief, loss, joy, happy times, relationships, and see how it's expressed throughout all these different frames of life, so that way you can understand, okay, when I'm in this situation, what's a healthy response here?
Exactly. And I've seen him in these situations where it's like, whoa, like you're facing this and you're this calm.
Yeah.
And you got everything together. And he was just like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we need to see people live it out. And I think you and I were talking about what would be a good representation of healthy masculinity. And for me, it's Jesus. I feel like Jesus is a great representation of what healthy masculinity looks like. And he did some things that weren't always, people I think see Jesus as this religious figure. But there's moments in the Bible where he turned over tables, where he chased people out with whips,
where he did what he needed to do.
He used a very masculine energy, yes, but he also was able to extend love very, very largely on a grand scale. He was a teacher. He healed people. He had a nurturing quality. He listened well. So I think he's a great representation of what healthy masculinity could look like. And another one that came to mind was Mr. Rogers.
Okay. That's cool.
Rest in peace.
Yes, rest in peace. But Mr. Rogers, I think he did a service to a lot of kids because he showed a figure of a healthy male role model who I think what's lacking with the masculinity in the healthy form is that a lot of young boys have been taught that masculinity always has to be like assertive and harsh and dominant, and that there's not an openness. And I think you can be assertive, and I think you can be firm and strong and still have an openness and not always be so sharp with judgment.
See, and so I love being honest on my podcast. I didn't have that. I didn't have the assertiveness.
I don't think a lot of people have seen it or had it.
And I felt that it was wrong to have it. I was almost ashamed when I had to be assertive or I had to like make a decision. And then my mentor were like, no, you need to do this.
Yes.
That's actually attractive to women when you do this and you face this thing. It's like, well, I had no frame of reference for it. I'd never seen anybody do it until my mentor was so cool. Like he would take me, he's like, you need to see me do this. Come on.
That's awesome that you had that.
Yeah. Let's get in the truck and you need to see me do this.
That's great.
And he would have to go and I would see him make a tough decision. And it's like, whoa,
yeah,
like that's a thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's possible. And so now in my life, that's how I'm with my boys. That's how I am with my friends. And I'm able to give it because somebody gave it to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's still a struggle. It's still something that I'm always facing. It's like, well, no, this is my role. But the cool part about it. It's like when I'm in my role, I feel good.
That's important.
Right? Like
Yeah.
I feel like, oh, this is what it feels like.
And I think that that's a testament to you being in your essence, right? Because when we are aligned, then things are in harmony, and harmony tends to create that feeling of peace and serenity and flow state and things like that. So if you're a healthy individual, I think when you have that response, that it can be a reminder that this is good. This is you being in alignment with your true nature, with yourself.
So that's like an
flow.
indicator. That's an indicator like, okay, you're on the right path, or you're.
I think for a healthy individual, yes. I think there are some individuals that their reality is skewed and their feelings have been disconnected from what is true and what is, in alignment with their true essence. And that can create distortion for them. But I think by and large, most people that are healthy individuals, when you have that sense of peace and that sense of purpose of, okay, this is what I'm here for, this is what I'm created to do, then yes, I think that definitely should be seen as a sign that you're in alignment with what you're supposed to be in alignment to.
Gotcha.
And you feel the opposite when you're out of
when
alignment.
you're not, right?
Yeah.
You kind of, and I've noticed that I've learned to listen to those, I guess my body and like, okay, oh, now I'm out of alignment.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I didn't go handle a situation that I should have handled, it's like that now there feels like a disconnect,
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of interesting. Like one of the things I did before the podcast, I went and paid a bill. And like now I get joy out of paying my bills. Like that's a thing that men do. They take care of their responsibilities. And before it was like from my upbringing, it was like the bills are here. Oh no. Like, what are we going to do? And then arguments. And it's like, why? I don't even know why we were doing that as kids, or why did I see that from my parents? It's like, well, no, you go handle it. It's here. And now it's like, I went and paid the bill. It's like, I felt great afterwards.
So one of my teachers says, the truth feels good. And I see that as a demonstration of the truth feels good, because when we're in alignment with our true self, we are living in truth. And so when we do what's right and responsible in alignment with what's true, that feels good. And I think that feelings have gotten a really bad rap in our culture, especially the more closely you're involved with like traditional religious belief systems. There's a lot of shaming for following your feelings. And I believe that from a human perspective, our feelings have been given to us as a gift to show alignment or out of alignment, to help us get back into that healthy homeostatic place of when we are aligned to ourselves. And so if we can do a better job of tuning in and recognizing this feels good, this feels right, or this feeling in my gut or my chest, I feel tight or tense, then we can start to interpret better whether we're in alignment or whether we're out of alignment.
And you're saying feeling, and feeling is different than an emotion. It's like, well, you got to feel the emotion. You got to feel what's behind there. And me and Justin were talking about a little bit yesterday when we were going to discuss today. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, I would just say, people should just sit with themselves for a little while.
Every day.
Just sit with yourself and feel if is that right? Is that right for you? Like I don't judge people, or I try my best not to judge them in a situation, whatever they're at. But I would tell them, well, go sit with yourself.
Yeah.
Shut off the TV, put away the phone, and just go sit and see if that path you're going down feels like the right thing to do. Once I started doing that, I've been meditating for 2 years now. It's like, oh my goodness.
It's one of the best things that I ever started doing. And
what was wrong with me for this many years, up until I was 37? Like I never sat with myself. I always needed distraction. I needed something going on to kind of blind me from looking into that darkness.
To drown out the noise.
To drown it out.
Of yourself, of the feelings, of the knowings, of the discomfort. And that is what we are doing right now in our society. Most people cannot sit with themselves in silence. I mean, I would challenge anyone who's listening here, any of our viewers, that just take 5 minutes and really challenge yourself to turn everything off. Turn off your phone, turn off the noise that's in the background. Don't allow yourself to be distracted, and just sit and feel and listen, internally listen. And it's going to be uncomfortable. And you know what? The discomfort, that's growth.
And that's telling you something, isn't it?
It is. So yeah, like what you were saying is if you listen to yourself and you are honest about what you're feeling, then it puts you to a decision point, right? Am I going to stay the same, or am I going to realize that I'm out of alignment and change my behavior to do whatever it is that I need to do to get back in that alignment with myself, to come back to my own truth? And that's what I like to think about meditation as, is it's coming home to yourself every day.
Mm-hmm.
Every time that you do it, you're coming back home to yourself, because in today's world, at least for me, it's so easy to get drawn away from your true nature, from your true self, from your true essence. And so the only way that I know to find it again is to come back home. And I do that in sitting in silence and meditation and turning off the noise.
That's a practice you've developed?
Yes.
For how long?
Probably about 15 years now.
15 years.
I haven't always done it consistently. I have been doing it consistently probably for about the past 2 years or so.
Okay. Of
a daily practice. And even the science now is supporting that as little as 8 to 10 minutes a day can change your brain. That's
so the brain chemistry, what does it change about your brain? So
the brain has this thing called neuroplasticity, which basically means that it can create new pathways for electrical impulses to flow through. And a new pathway is any new thought, any new behavior, any new pattern that you want to create, a habit, anything like that. People used to think that we were hardwired. Well, research has shown that's not true. We can rewire our brains, and we can do it through things like meditation and creating more neural pathways by trying new things, or by allowing yourself to just have different brain states where your brain can start to process and reset in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so in doing this for 8 to 10 minutes a day, not only are you able to create new circuitry and wires and how you think and how you feel, but it actually helps to help improve other health factors like reducing stress and anxiety. It helps with your sleep. It helps balance your hormones. All of these things. I mean, what better pill could you get? That does all of that in one place. And this is just 8 to 10 minutes a day.
Yeah. We had a board meeting here. We're at the Littlewood Co-op. This is where we record this nice art gallery. And we had a board meeting. And so we're dividing up responsibilities. And one of the things was cleaning. I was like, well, I'll clean. I'll do the dishes. And everybody looked at me like, what? The dishes? That's the worst. And so I mentioned that, well, no, I programmed my brain to like to do dishes.
Yeah, I remember you telling me about
that. We talked about it on
Yeah.
the last one, and it really worked.
It does.
At first, I was there like hot and heated and sweating and frustrated, but it's like, no, I really like doing dishes, and I would wash them. I really like, and I'll put some movement into it, maybe put on some music and dance. And then that was about like 2.5 years ago. And to this day, if there's dishes in the sink out here, I'll go just do them.
You're going to race me to them, aren't you?
Yeah. So I just go do them. And it's like, it just became second nature. So you're right that you can reprogram your brain. And then I thought about it more. It was like, oh, my dad, when he would get off, if the dishes weren't done, he would be in a bad mood. He'd complain. And sometimes if he was really angry, he would actually break dishes just to show like it's a woman's place to do dishes. And I got off of work. These aren't done. I'm going to break some. So that kind of was imprinted on me to like, okay, dishes, it's like a bad area.
Bad
Don't do it.
Yeah.
And I had to step and say, no, I got to face this. And I reprogrammed it just by doing some tricks that I read from like Tony Robbins and some other people. And it really works.
It does. And another thing that they've shown that has a really big impact is gratitude. That gratitude, people that have gratitude and can practice it on a daily basis are happier. They have less incidence of depression or anxiety. So pairing meditation with gratitude, I feel like is like your superfood.
That's superpower, huh?
It is. It really
okay.
is. Yeah. So you're doing all of the health benefits that we talked about before, plus gratitude, which is going to help the thing that I believe now the current rates are between 45 and 65% of our population are on some form of antidepressant or anti-anxiety drug. And you can actually address that free with just having time where you sit and you express gratitude from your heart for those things that you're grateful for. And once you start doing it, I find that you start to see, you have more of a capacity to see all the things that you're grateful for. It's like it expands your awareness.
So then can you do something like, I'm grateful for the darkness.
I am grateful for the darkness.
Grateful
It's
for
a
the
gift.
darkness.
Yes.
Grateful for that place where I don't want to go, but every time I go there, there's like a treasure.
Right. And I think that might be hard for some people starting out. So start with the things that are easy to be grateful for. And as you start to do that, it's like a snowball effect. It just becomes easier and easier, like a ball rolling down a hill. So then, I'm grateful for clean water. I'm grateful for heat and air. Okay, now I'm grateful for that just uncomfortable conversation I had today with my boss. And so you start to be able to see, it starts to expand your awareness.
And you can really get there.
Yeah, you can.
You can get to a place where you're like, I'm grateful for the uncomfortable conversation I had with my boss, because I've been there and they got really uncomfortable. But I was like, no, I think I need to be in this classroom. I need to be here, and there's something, and I was grateful for it. And I'm glad I stuck it out, because now, he's an entrepreneur, has a successful business, very successful. And now I'm starting my business back up again. And it's like, he was right. He was right. He was right. I'm so grateful. So when I saw him today, and he was kind of like, because we left on bad terms, he was like, don't say anything bad. It's like, no, it's going to be good. I'm grateful. I'm at a pace. I went and shook his hand, and it's like, no, I'm grateful for this.
It's all good.
It's all
and that's
good.
what gratitude, the practice of it, helps you do. It really helps you to start to see how everything really is good. It really expands your awareness and your perspective of those things in the moment when we're in that potentially fight or flight response and we're in the animal brain that's just reactive. Gratitude brings us back to our frontal cortex, where we've evolved to be as humans, where we can think, where we can rationalize, where we have creativity. And we get there and we start to see things from a higher bird's eye view and say, okay, I couldn't see that while I was in it, but now that I'm up here, I see how that's connected to this next step in my life, that's going to get me where I want to be.
It gives you a whole different point of view, a whole different way of looking at your life.
It makes me think of the story of Joseph in the Bible. Are you familiar?
Very familiar.
Okay. So Joseph, he was sold into slavery by his brothers, and he went into Egypt, and he was a slave. And through this whole course of events, Joseph does the right thing. He makes the right choice to stay attuned to who he is, which is to be an honorable man in healthy masculinity. And he gets thrown in prison, and he gets falsely accused. But he continues to do the right thing to where eventually at the end of the story, he becomes second in command to Pharaoh. And so all of those things, he even says, he's like, what was intended for evil, God turned into good.
So the prison was a classroom.
The prison was a classroom.
The slavery was a classroom.
It was preparing him for his next step in the journey. And I think that's what is so easy for us to lose sight of, that every battle that we fight, it's training us for the next place that we're going to be. And if we don't have that battle, if we don't have that struggle, if we don't get to use that resistance and do that weight training, we're not going to be strong enough when we get to that next place.
Wow.
So have gratitude.
Have gratitude. So what would you say to a woman that's trying to come into her femininity?
So that is something that I find very fascinating, because for me, I didn't feel like I had a really good feminine model. And I think a lot of women, if they're honest, there's a lot of female energy out there, but not necessarily healthy femininity. There's a lot of seductress archetypes. There's a lot of, a lot of the feminine characteristics are portrayed as negative or over sexualized, but having like a healthy type of feminine role model wasn't so readily available for me. And another thing that women have done is, in order to succeed in today's world, they've taken on a lot of masculine energy traits and roles. And so that's what I had. I had very strong women, but they were acting in their masculine.
They were strong, but because they had and it's not probably their fault, right?
Right. It's probably what they learned or what they knew they had to do to survive.
Because I would look at my mom, right, where my mom did everything in the house. Mm-hmm. Well, it's because my dad wasn't. And for us to survive, she had to do it. And so I thought, kind of growing up, that imprint at 7 years old, when these things are being formed, like, oh, this is just the way it goes, right?
Yes.
So later on, when I get married, I'm thinking, well, this is just the way it goes. Come to find out, it's not the way it goes, right? But it wasn't my mom's fault, it's just the situation she was in. But it is up to her to go down into that cave, to go face herself and figure out, okay, why isn't this working the way I'm supposed to work? Because she would do it, but there would be a resentment there that he's not doing it.
Yeah.
She would pick it up, but it was a resentment saying, well, he's supposed to be doing it. And that's the other thing that I learned was like, oh, my dad's bad,
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, my dad's a bad guy. I don't ever want to be like that. I don't want to. So that was imprinted on me. So it's like I had nowhere to go until I found my mentor at 16, and he was doing a roof at the church, and it was a lot of work, and I was there with somebody else, and he's like, I'm out of here. I ain't going to do this. And I stayed there. It's like, well, I'm going to do this roof. I'm going to figure out what this means and figure it out. So so for the woman though, she has to find something, right? Somebody.
Yeah. I think it's equally as hard for women now to find, what does healthy femininity look like, as it is for men?
What does it even look like?
What does it look like? Because I feel like we are so readily drawn to these extremes for the masculine energy and for the feminine energy. And what does that balanced, healthy energy look like? And I think there's been a lot of, probably historically a little bit longer, shaming of aspects of feminine energy and the divine gift, and how women are very connected to the cycles of nature. And having things like a menstrual cycle be seen as dirty and bad.
Which it's not.
Wrong.
It's a part of nature. Like you said, there's, it's kind of interesting to me. Like, so a woman kind of knows when she becomes a woman. Mm-hmm. There's like this thing that happens in cultures for a man to become a man. That's why they do like these rites of passage to it's like, okay, no, you're a man now.
Like a bar mitzvah.
So there had to be something instituted, but a woman is so in touch with nature. It's just like, it blossoms, it blooms. as one. A man could be like 40 years old and still like, okay, I'm still a kid and, play around. But it's like, no, a woman, like we have responsibilities now. There's something changing. There's something developing, and you have to go down that road, right?
Yeah. I mean, a woman's body is her monthly reminder of the cycle of life. And I think that in some ways that makes it easier for women to stay in touch with that feminine energy and that flow, and seeing that life is cyclical, and it's less linear, which I think that linear perspective tends to be more of a masculine energy kind of quality. And thinking about this, I think, what if like the balance between the feminine energy of having that reminder of the cycle is here to help remind the masculine energy, to help bring that male energy back to the earth and to the cycles of nature, that once again, it's not supposed to be one is better than the other. It's supposed to be both and together.
A harmony. Right.
Because if one is doing a certain role, the masculine energy is doing a certain role. And I believe that you mentioned vision a couple of times. I think that vision tends to be a very masculine trait, which we absolutely need. We need someone with strong, piercing vision. And that tends to be what drives us forward towards a direction. That's a masculine energy. But then we need the feminine energy that's in the cycle that reminds the visionary, come back.
And there's not a problem of going forward,
right.
And there's not a problem of coming back. It's just like both.
It's both and.
It's both and. It's like this, okay. And it's nothing wrong with the man getting caught up in the vision. It's just what he's going to do.
Right.
It's just going to be a part of, and then the woman's supposed to be like, no, come back.
There's a time for rest. There's a time to drive forward. There's a time to rest. There's a time for, like, it's the whole Ecclesiastes, right? Mm-hmm. There's a time for war. There's a time for peace. There's a time for love. There's a time for hate. There's a time to sow, and there's a time to reap. There's a time to build, and there's a time to quit building. And it's the balance of all of these that make life beautiful and healthy. And it's when we get skewed to one side or the other, and we start labeling and judging and attributing more value to one, and not seeing the value as them be integrated as one unit holistically.
So then a healthy woman that's into her femininity will want to uplift her man.
Yes.
Wouldn't be threatened about him being that piercing vision that's going forward. She would like, no, that's needed.
And I think equally a healthy man would be willing to support a woman who has a visionary masculine energy, and really support her in moving forward too, that they would both be able to flow in and out of their masculine and feminine together
in like a cycle.
Yeah. So that way they're supported, and it's less of a binary type of weight that's put on one person. And I think that's where a lot of the imbalance in our culture has come from, is us imposing these expectations of roles of you can only do within this lane. And then it becomes overwhelming, and there's no helping or lifting of the load and a flow back and forth. And it's not a team effort anymore. It's the single point of failure on either side. And then we can't survive without each other. We've tried to. We've said, I don't need you. But we do. We need both.
For life to happen, for the future, it has to.
Yeah, life needs it. Life needs the balance. We need the balance. And not necessarily that we need another person, but we need to embrace the balance within us, both qualities. Mm-hmm. We need to be willing to say, I have masculinity within me. Maybe I need to check my toxic masculinity at the door too.
Wow.
And maybe, what about my toxic femininity?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we all need to be more introspective about, maybe it's just toxicity that we need to look out for instead of applying labels.
And the toxicity would be, you're not looking out for each other.
I think
right? The only time you're going to be toxic is if you're not looking out for your brother, your sister, and then you're going to come with this type of energy that has no bearing to the relationship.
Yeah, I think it's when we start to just see and ascribe labels and judgments of, once again, it's what we're denying, what we're pushing into the darkness within ourselves. That's what's damaging. When we can accept ourselves fully, all of it, the masculine, the feminine, the whole thing, and we don't label one as better or worse than the other, but we see them both as absolutely essential to life for us and for others, then that's where health comes in. That's when you can flow. That's when you are in flow. And being able to have the introspective time to develop the skill and the awareness and the discipline on when is appropriate to move in and out of each of these roles.
So you would say, so one thing, or the big thing, learn to sit with yourself, and then maybe find somebody that you think embodies this healthy masculinity or femininity to the best, and then kind of model or use that as like a template.
I think we do. We need to all start like asking the questions of ourselves first and of our culture of what does healthy look like? What does healthy femininity look like? And how would that be personified in our society and culture? And how can I exemplify that? How can I walk that out on a daily basis? How can I be a mentor for someone younger than me? What does healthy masculinity look like? And how can that be exemplified in our culture? And then also, I think, be aware of what are the messages that are being given, either outrightly or covertly, about what is appropriate. Because I think that's a huge question now. It's like we've confined these roles into, I can't say anything now, right?
Yeah.
Because what's appropriate? I can't compliment someone because it's going to be perceived as something negative or something unhealthy or aggressive. And I think we just really need to really reevaluate what does healthy look like and start personifying that within our own lives.
Yeah. And that's, I think that's a great thing, because if you start here, then the rest flows and it gets attracted to you.
But you can't do that as long as you're just bombarded by all of the media and all of the noise and
Shut
all
it
of
off.
the people that
Get
tell
rid
you
of it.
Exactly. Well, not only that, but like you can't just take something away and not fill it, because nature hates a vacuum, right? You have to be able to start interjecting that. That's why I said we have to ask the question, what does healthy look like? Because when we start withdrawing the negative, we've got to fill it with something. We've got to put something back out there. And I think, when in doubt, follow love. Like go in the direction of love.
How can you be toxic if you follow love?
Yeah. I mean, and what is love?
Yeah. One of the things when you say ask questions, my mentor, to get a notebook and write questions down. And that stuff that was one of the things. What does it look like? I would write that down actually, because just as a practice, like I need to know where to aim.
Yes.
Where to go. And it's crazy. And he said, you'll notice like things will start to pop up.
Yeah. Well, and that was what I was going to say, was like in meditation, that's one of the benefits that I've noticed is that it primes your brain. So it's like the effect.
There you go. It primes your brain.
It primes your brain. It's like the effect of when you buy a new car that you've never had before, and all of a sudden you see it everywhere on the road. Like, who bought these cars at the exact same time that I bought my car? Nothing has changed. It's just your brain has been primed to notice it more. So meditation, you can do the same thing, like you're mentioning, priming yourself to be more aware and observant of what you're looking to see. Because it's so self-promoting bias actually has us to where our brain will look for things that support our belief that we already have. Our brain is so narcissistic.
That's so horrible, our brains.
But that's how we're built, is to find things that support the beliefs that we already have. So if you want to change a belief system, you have to start with a question. And you have to start with the right questions. And then you have to be willing and open to look and see answers come in that maybe aren't aligned with your former beliefs.
Yeah, the ones that are uncomfortable. I learned one thing, like if you clasp your hands together, there's a normal way that your thumbs always sit.
Yeah.
And if you unclasp them and then do it with the other thumb on top, it feels very uncomfortable. But if you do it enough times over and over again, it starts to build like, okay, I could do this. But the first, it's just like, what am I doing? What is this? And people could practice this if they're listening or watching. It's like, yeah, that's uncomfortable. But if you do it like about 10 times, it's like, oh,
yeah,
okay.
It comes back to the whole neural plasticity and rewiring the circuitry in our brain. And one way to do that faster, and Tony Robbins talks about this in his conferences, and getting people to move their bodies. Because when we have a thought or a belief that we want to change and we incorporate body movement, we more deeply ingrain those neural pathways. And so if you want to change a belief, incorporate a corresponding behavior that you're going to do too. And that's going to help drive that change faster.
Could it be like any type of activity? Because I remember when somebody told me, it's like when you do your affirmations, go run and do affirmations. Like the two together become deadly.
As long as it's consistent.
As long
because
as
you're
it's consistent? Okay.
creating new patterns, you're creating new habits for your brain, associations. And so, yeah, and that's what world religions have done with like mantras and prayers and things like that, is the repetitive nature, and mudras, which you do in yoga sometimes, and meditation, is going through the sequence the same way over and over and over again. You're creating wires and routes in your brain for the circuitry to flow. You're creating patterns and habits.
You know, one thing I do, and I noticed when I looked at last episode, I talk with my hands a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I always move. Well, I was listening to a podcast that said that actually helps you think.
Mm-hmm.
And if somebody would go, they did experiments to tie your hands, you would have a hard time thinking. That it was the person that talks with their hands would like, okay, what am I doing again? But when they're flowing like that, that actually gets the words to help come out. And it's like, oh, that's cool. That's why I do it. I never knew that. But that was a experiment they did and a study they did on people that talk with their hands. So it's like, oh, the two flow together, the mind and the body. And there was also a study that had to do with people with Alzheimer's and dementia. The old thought was, okay, get them to do crossword puzzles and these things to work their brains.
Mind, yeah.
Well, they found out actually exercise was better. Getting them to bounce a ball was actually better for them than just doing a crossword puzzle and working their minds.
Yeah. So
incorporate movement and a practice.
Yeah, it comes back to the whole holistic component and getting away from the compartmentalizing everything and breaking things into parts. Like we're so good at
there
doing,
you go.
And realizing that the human being, it's holistic, and you can't just separate one from the other. But I think we talked about our last episode about with hypnotherapy that the memories we believe are stored in our body and our nervous system. And so the brain and the body are very deeply connected on so many different levels. And now they're able to measure that we're electrical and we have energy. And some people believe, I believe, that we have energy bodies that extend beyond our physical bodies. And so when we move, we interact with all of these different energies. And I was actually listening to a study that talks about how as humans, we are electrical, and that when we're in the same room with other electrical bodies, that if we're in there long enough, we all start to synchronize. Like our energies and our heartbeats will start to get on the same wavelength. And if you think about that, and you think about that on a grander scale of like concerts and our culture, they've actually shown that people's brain waves will start to resonate at the same frequency level
just because they're together in a room experiencing something.
I think that we don't really understand the complexities of us being the social beings that we are. I think we know we're social beings as far as, looking at apes and primates and how we work in a societal type of, construct. But I don't think we really understand the things that we don't see, the energies, our energy bodies, the frequencies, the connection, the vibrations that we all carry, that we all have like an individual energetic fingerprint, and how that can influence other people's energy by coming into their field. And so if you're healthy and you're resonating at this certain frequency and I come into your field, I feel good. I feel, like good vibes only. But then also if I have all of this darkness that I'm refusing to look at and maybe some toxicity, then how does that impact when I come into a room? How does that influence the energy and the frequency? And I think there's so much that we're just now learning that I think within the next 5 to 10 years, science is going to start to really support what has been said through these ancient religious belief systems all along.
They knew something. They were onto something.
Yeah,
you would even look at Tesla. He said, if you want to understand the world, look at everything as energy.
It is.
And you were talking about the stuff stored in your body. Like if I start to think a certain thought, I get a pain right here. Every time that and so the pain was like, oh, I'm thinking it again. I was. And so I meditate, stop, don't think about that anymore, because that becomes like a bad place to start traveling down. And so I have to do I forgive this person. It's okay. And the pain will go away. But anytime I start thinking about this resentment and this stuff, the pain would start to come slowly, start building. And it's built before. And I've noticed if I let it go unchecked for a week, it start getting tight with my whole back.
Yeah.
And it built, and I'm like, what am I doing to myself?
I don't think that we realize, especially if we're not taking the time to be still and tune in, how much we carry in our physical form at the end of the day, from the stress, from the anxiety or the tension. And when we start to get more in tune with our bodies, then we have like a navigation system. Like you've kind of noticed, you know, like, okay, when I hurt here, maybe that means that I need to express some forgiveness for someone. Or when there's a reason why our culture says it makes me sick to my stomach, you know, it's because our bodies naturally have learned how to have a reaction and response because they're teaching us something. There's such wisdom in our bodies that if we learn to listen to it, we can save ourselves so much time and pain. But if we don't, what's the outcome? You're seeing it. People are getting sick. People are having heart attacks and anxiety.
And the news will just say, we don't know why it's
cancer.
happening.
I mean, I think there are a lot of factors, but I think you can't deny that we internalize emotions, and those emotions create a response. You know, the whole fight or flight response, our brains evolved that response so we'd survive. But our culture, we haven't evolved to meet up to the shift of what's fight or flight response worthy anymore. Now
it could be an email.
Exactly. Or that uncomfortable talk with your boss. That could be the lion that's chasing you, but it's creating the same biochemical response. Yeah.
And then you're locked down and you're terrified because, you know, you could run away from a tiger, you could run away, but an email, that's bad, can lurk in your mind and go to your dreams and continue to haunt you unless you deal with it.
And that's what I was gonna say. What do we do? Do we choose to tune in and deal with it, or do we just deny it and say, oh, that's nothing? You know, because we feel like it should be nothing. Or do we acknowledge that there's a wisdom in our body and our nervous system and our hormones, and we look at it and we realize maybe there's something I can do about this. You know, maybe I need to take some time and do some deep breathing. Maybe I need to offer some forgiveness. Maybe I need to extend some gratitude. Maybe I'm harboring a lot of toxic beliefs that I need to address.
Yeah, we're going to have to wrap it up here. So, slow down, get rid of all the noise, listen to yourself, or let the thoughts come up, let whatever rise up, right?
Yeah.
Going to be uncomfortable.
I would say release judgment. Really extend a healthy masculine and a healthy feminine openness to whatever arises without judgment, and instead ask the question, what is this trying to show me? What is this trying to teach me? Why is this here? What does healthy look like that maybe I'm not seeing? And prime yourself to see the answers that you're looking for.
And you say prime, maybe even prepare for it might be uncomfortable.
Growth is uncomfortable. Do you want to grow?
That's what it comes down to, right?
Yeah.
It's like, do you want this? And it's crazy because people can say no.
Sure. But you know what? Not growing is uncomfortable too. Ignorance is uncomfortable. So either way, you're going to have to deal with some kind of discomfort.
It's coming for you.
Are you on the path of growth, or are you on the path of refusal to grow in ignorance? Either way, you're going to be miserable. The only thing is if you choose growth, eventually there's less discomfort as you go down that path. And there's more capacity to extend love to the world and gratitude and to live in a healthier place. If you just deny it, you get to stay in the discomfort and your toxicity.
You know, I started this podcast because, you know, I've been on a journey, and I knew there was other people out there that been on similar journeys like you, know, run into you. And this has helped me process a lot and has helped me to grow. And I feel pretty good.
It feels great, right?
The past 2 to 3 years, you know, even though because it was a pretty heavy weight that hit me, I lost everything, company, family, house, car, like I was left with nothing but a skateboard and my mentor. But it's like, yeah, I feel good consistently.
It's hard. Like, I'm not going to lie to anyone, like growing and dealing and facing the darkness and going through the healing journey, it hurts.
Yeah.
But you know what? The hurting eventually stops, and then the healing begins.
And then it feels like
liberating
over and over again. Like sometimes I get too good to where I get nervous. Mm-hmm. Like it's like, wait, this is too good.
Foreboding joy is what Brene Brown would call that.
Oh, okay. Because it's like, wait, something has to happen.
Yeah.
You know, and then like the self-saboteur will come in or whatever, but it's like, well, something has to happen, but if I just sit like, oh.
And eventually you start to realize that what's supposed to happen is harmony.
Yeah. And then a good day leads to another good day and and there's some bads, there's the waves, but then I handle it totally different now when when it dips down, It's like I have a whole different process of how, like, okay, I know it's going to come up. Ah, we're here again. All right.
But you never have room for that good or for that harmony if you aren't willing to let go.
Got to let go.
You gotta let go of the good but not great. You gotta let go of the bad, because the only way that you can have more goodness come into your life is releasing what is no longer in alignment with who you truly are. And that can be a hard journey, but it feels so good when you embrace it.
I think that's a perfect place to end. Thank you very much for coming
Thank
on.
you.
It was great to have
All
you
of you.
officially. Yeah, Justin was way too talkative.
My bad.
Yeah, it's way too
Sorry,
much.
guys.
Yeah. But thank you guys for listening again. And we're going to do everything, the commercials afterwards, right? Justin says yes. All right. Thank you guys. And may God bless you on your journey. Goodbye.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. You guys crushed it.
Yeah, no, she crushed it.